Hey guys, how's it going? Matt here with another episode. The following episode is going to be a little bit technical. For some of you, it might be a little bit hard to understand. I know electronics is a bit of a hard thing for me to understand, but we have Sam here. This is the owner of Just Roaming Design. This is a pretty special system. This is a system that's going to go in the Yeti, and it's going to power the Gyro journey as I travel from Alaska down to South America, all the way across to Europe, and hopefully many places beyond. These are batteries. This is an inverter, and this is the Wakespeed. That's about as far as I'm going to go. I'm going to pass it to Sam, and he's going to explain to you what these components do and how they're going to be advantageous to the journey as I travel around the world. You helped me to design this along with some other people at Victron, and we moved from 12 volt to 24 and then 48. And before we get into the system, maybe you can explain a little bit why 48 is the magic number.
There's kind of two different aspects as to why you'd step up in voltage, and the first is going to be the amount of power that you're using within that system. So if you have high amperage loads or high use loads in the system, then it bumps up that amperage pretty considerably. And when you step up in voltage, you step down in amperage. You take a 12 volt system, it's going to have twice as much amperage flowing through as a 24 volt system, and so on and so forth with 48. So that's kind of one aspect as to why you step up in voltage, to reduce amperage, which reduces cable sizing. And then the other side of it is energy generation. So you can just produce more energy when stepping up in voltage. You know, we just installed a nation starter alternator yesterday on your rig, and the most popular 280 amp 12 volt produces about 3,500 watts. The 24 volt version produces about 3,800 watts, and then we're seeing about 5,000 watts out of the 48 volt, so almost double. You know, the guys over at Nations and Wakespeed are finalizing those numbers on. It'll be reduced just so that, you know, warranties aren't voided and whatnot. But yeah, it can produce well over that. We're just sort of fine tuning it to sort of stay within the regulation and warranties. They
got to tone it down. It's just too damn powerful, which is pretty cool.
Which isn't the same with the others.
Yeah, so they're basically sucking as much as they can out of the 12 volt alternator, but for this 48, they've got to be like, hey, hold it. Yeah,
I mean, we're at the moment limiting it to like sort of 50% of its capability.
Before we talk so much about the system, which we'll get to in a second, Sam, tell me a little bit about your history. What do you do here at Just Roaming? And what's the future?
Everybody has the same story, just changing out what vehicle, pretty much. But converted out of school bus, lived on the road for a while, took a really deep interest into sort of off-grid energy solutions, and contacted Victron several years ago, and was lucky enough to be brought onto their team. We get a lot of questions as to what the ambassador role kind of is, and it was essentially designed by Ryan, who's the head of the North American distribution and team, to provide a support network for the sales reps as the distribution grows. Attend training sessions, both public and private, sort of attend expos and that kind of stuff, as well as helping out with sort of product feedback and sort of real life experience. Here at Just Roaming Design, we like to say that we're an off-grid energy company, but we're also sort of in the conversion space. So we run a full fabrication facility, we've got a CNC facility as well. So we do turnkey solutions, and then we run an install center where you can come in and just get an air conditioner put in or suspension and that kind of stuff.
I talked with Kaza. We met with Kaza in a video before. I'll link to that. Kaza is also a Victron ambassador. But each person has a bit of a different skill set and role within the community. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the system, broad strokes, and then we get into the specifics.
With every system, you start with sort of the energy storage side of things, as in batteries. So we're running the Victron 200 amp hour 12 volt batteries. We're running in the series to create a 200 amp hour 48 volt bank. The reason that we're running 4 batteries in series is because we really like the form factor of the 200s for your particular application. They're also really accessible to get. Some of the other newer form factors are just impossible to get at this moment. So we're starting out with these in series. You can parallel as many batteries up to 5 with a single BMS, and series connections don't count towards that. So this will count as a single 48 volt 200 amp hour bank in the eyes of the BMS.
Okay, so for layman's terms, and something that I had to kind of get through, because we were talking about 48 volt, 12 volt, 24 volt, and understanding what capacity that is. The 12 volt system is 800 amp hours, and it's being consolidated?
Yeah, you're just running it in series. So when you step up in voltage, the amperage doesn't change.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is kind of what I was talking to you about earlier in terms of like within the industry, it's way easier just to talk in watts because watts don't change across the board.
Yeah.
Whereas when you mention amperage, you have to keep it in relation to voltage. So even though this is a 200 amp hour 48 volt bank made up of 200 amp hour 12 volt batteries, the battery voltage is still going to be around 10 kilowatts.
Yeah.
And each battery is about 2.5 kilowatts. To shout out my friend Charlie Kern, who owns Chrome Yellow, he sort of got on his soapbox the other day and went on about wattage versus amperage, and I fully agree. Cool, so yeah, major difference between Victron batteries as opposed to other batteries on the market is going to be the external BMS. And so by removing the BMS, you remove some of those limitations. So one, you're going to get an increase in energy density because you don't have to have an individual computer in every single battery. There's still a balancing board and there's communication, but it's much more reduced than, say, other batteries on the market that have the contactor inside. So you have Bluetooth communication to an app that you can just have on your phone, which is really handy for troubleshooting. So if you were to have a cell indifference or something like that, you'd be able to identify it immediately. But then you also have communication from each battery on an individual cell level to be able to shut down certain aspects of the system in unfavorable conditions. So BMS is designed to protect the batteries in under or over voltage and under and over temperature. Let's say you need to shut down the loads, you don't want to open up that contact and cut off the full battery from being able to charge. So these batteries can communicate with that BMS to just turn off loads while still allowing charge. If you look at other comparable internal BMS brands on the market, I'm not going to mention names, but super common, you'll see typical discharge rates around 100 to 150. Some of the like more advanced batteries on the market are getting like 300, whereas like an individual 12 volt 200 Victron can discharge at 400 amps continuous. So when people talk about you have to have X amount of batteries to support an inverter, that's kind of a fallacy with Victron because it has the discharge rate. They're more relating to sort of that 100 amp discharge that you see in common brands.
Is there a heater on those batteries?
There is not.
There is not.
No.
Yeah.
So that's probably something that we're looking for in the future.
Well, I'll have hydronic heating in there, so there'll be the floors underneath the batteries will be heated. So
yeah, you know, when you have multiple batteries, we really like to combine all of those batteries onto a bus bar and then distribute them into the LYNX system. And the LYNX family of products is a bus bar and distribution sort of lineup from Victron that provides an enclosure with sort of different sort of functionality depending on which product. Normally, if this was like a 12 or a 24 volt system, and we're using 12 and 24 volt batteries in parallel, we would combine them on a bus bar and then they would go into the LYNX BMS, or they would go into a LYNX in and then into the BMS. With this, because we're only going to have a single negative and positive come off, we're just going to go directly onto the LYNX Smart BMS. You can see the red and black tabs that will be removed to accept those. I think that they could have probably named it something different because the BMS makes you think that it's only a single unit in there. Whereas this LYNX Smart BMS actually has a range of different functionality within the inside. So it is BMS, which is battery management system, so it protects in under and over temperature, under and over voltage. It also, because you have to use Victron batteries with a Victron BMS, it already knows what it's connecting to, and so it removes a lot of those programming parameters, so it makes installation really easy. It also has a contact built inside that can either be triggered via Bluetooth or a remote switch, which makes it really easy it's already got the master disconnect for your system built in. Programming is one of the things that people sort of miss the most in terms of Victron systems, and the fact that this is already taken care of is a huge thing. Not to mention that bolts directly into the LYNX family, which means that installation is a breeze. So rather than having to mount 3 or 4 independent components that this now removes, it just bolts straight on and you've got 4 mounting posts.
This table doesn't look as busy as I wanted it to be, and it's a lot because the components at Victron do multiple jobs, and so they take the place of multiple components. It doesn't look like there's a lot of stuff here, but each piece of each component does a lot of functions.
Yeah, spot on. Which is a good segue into the next LYNX product in the family that we're using, which is a LYNX distributor. LYNX distributor is just a positive and negative bus bar. It's got 5 negative posts on the bottom and it's got 4 positive posts on top. The difference with the distributor compared to the LYNX in is that the posts on top for the positive bus bar also have a way to include a mega fuse. So it's also your positive negative bus bar, but it then also includes 4 mega fuse holders. So it's all of your overcurrent protection built in, as well as your distribution, and then it's enclosed in a case which stops anything from sort of banging into it. When paired with a LYNX BMS, you also get Bluetooth monitoring of those fuses on your phone, but you also get LED indicators.
So your distributor is going to obviously distribute the power throughout your system.
Yeah, a lot of people are using LYNX distributors as their power in and using mega fuses to fuse their batteries. There's kind of two issues with that, and we reference ABYC standards a lot. And Charlie is also on the board for ABYC, who's also a Victron ambassador, and so we've checked in with him multiple times on this. But fuses have what's called an AIC rating, which is an amperage interrupt capacity. The rating is based on at what point how much amperage would go through that to where it would actually fuse the fuse together, rather than creating a disconnect. And mega fuses only have a rating of 2500 amps, whereas going with sort of like a class T at 20,000 or an MRBF at 10,000 is obviously well over that. So we like to use MRBF post fuses directly on our batteries and then go into our distribution. This also solves one of the issues that you want to have your overcurrent protection as close to the source of energy as possible. And so by putting a marine rated battery fuse on the terminal, it's as close to that battery as possible.
Did you guys get all that? Everything? Did you get it? I got some of it. The cool thing about the system that they're going to put in my van, because it's a 48 volt, because Just Roaming is trying to like diagnose and understand these systems, because 48 volt systems are becoming more and more popular, they're actually going to install an LTE monitoring system. So even if I don't understand all the jargon that just came out of his mouth, he's going to be able to probe into my system and be able to understand its capacities, how it's behaving in certain circumstances anywhere basically in North America. Am I right? Pretty much.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good point. 48 volts is sort of the future, and we're really lucky to be a part of that. We work really closely with Nation Starter and Alternator, with Adam and his team, and with Wakespeed as well, with Al. And so we're sort of in constant communication with them about system design and how this is all going to interact. But yeah, it's pretty awesome. I mean, the other thing is that we want to be able to get real-time data back on all of this stuff so that we can keep improving these systems for, the industry. And
what will you be able to see through this this component?
So the Servo GX is a monitoring device that we really like to include in our systems, which gives you the ability to monitor your AC and DC loads together. So all of your shore power in, all of your AC usage, your DC loads in terms of like, fridge, lights, that kind of stuff, but also your solar. Yeah, so BatteryProtect is essentially a remote contact that opens and closes based on what the BMS is telling it to do, or based on programming that you do via Bluetooth. So we mentioned that in the batteries, they don't have an internal contact, and that's how they get a much better form factor and a much higher discharge rate. And so we put in those safety parameters elsewhere. The BMS actually communicates with other devices in the system to be able to turn on and off charging or on and off discharge. And so a good example of that is the Multiplus inverter charger. So that communicates with the BMS via the servo, and so this will stop when it reads the sort of voltage coming from the shunt in the BMS, in the same sense that we can send a signal into the BatteryProtect to disconnect in whatever conditions. So specifically on this, we're using this 48 volt 100 amp BatteryProtect to turn off your air conditioner, so that the air conditioner won't deplete your batteries in the event that you get to a sort of over discharge state.
What about the inverter charger? Can you describe what the Mini Plus 2 is as opposed to the standard Mini Plus, and what that's going to do for me?
Yeah, so the Multiplus 2 really just a different form factor for the 48 volt. Essentially, it's going to do the same thing. Really important on Victron Multipluses, and actually their inverter and inverter charger series is they're all rated in VA ratings, which is going to be what the energy coming out of the batteries, not the continuous usage on the other side. So we see that a lot. This is not a 3000 watt inverter. It's a 3000 VA rating, which gives you 2400 watts continuous to use on the output side. So that's really important if you're planning on firing up an induction cook stove and an AC at once. This probably won't handle it. These can be parallel and series connected to give you more power, and they're constantly expanding on this line, and we sort of expect to see different units come out to sort of tackle that. But it's also a hybrid inverter charger. So what it does is when you're plugged into shore power, if you have an excess of shore power, it'll divert that energy and turn it into DC power to charge your batteries. If you have more loads on board than what your shore power is requiring, it'll actually invert from your batteries to supply the additional AC. So you can have 30 amps of pass through from shore power, but you can produce 50 amps on the output side, which is pretty sweet. It just does that all automatically as well.
Yeah.
Sure.
Can you describe to me what the Wakespeed 3000 is going to do for me and what its job is?
We put a second alternator into your rig, and that alternator needs a way to be regulated so that your battery bank gets exactly what it needs at that particular point in time. If you go with other alternator regulators on the market, you know, they typically base that on voltage and temperature, and the Wakespeed covers way more parameters than that. So because it integrates with the BMS, the batteries are telling the BMS what it needs, the BMS is telling the Wakespeed, and the Wakespeed is telling the alternator how to act. So you're going to see an increase in charge efficiency and built-in safety features with that. Wakespeed specializes in alternator regulators, so you'll typically see Wakespeed 500s, which is the alternator regulator portion, and we integrate those with Victron systems a lot as well. The Wakespeed 3000 has that 500 built in, but then it also has a bidirectional DC to DC converter. DC to DC converter is going to take one voltage and turn it into another.
Yeah.
The bidirectional aspect means that it works both ways. So not only is this going to be able to take 48 volts and convert it into 12 volts for all of your fridge and your lights and that kind of stuff, it's also going to be able to take 12 volts and turn it into 48 volts. What this means is that you can take a 48 volt alternator and run it directly into your battery bank, regulated by the alternator regulator that's built in, but then you can also hook up your 12 volt alternator to this unit and suck juice from your 12 volt alternator directly into your 48 volt bank simultaneously. So you're able to harness both alternators using this. It also supplies your 12 volt from your 48 volt.
So it's sort of doing somewhat of the job that the Multiplus 2 is doing?
In the same sense that it's regulating voltage, the difference is that an inverter is taking AC power and turning it to DC, or a DC power to AC in the inverter charger case where it can do both.
And that's just doing DC to DC?
DC to DC, yeah.
There's not many of these in the States right now, eh?
No, they're pretty hard to come by. You definitely need to know what you're doing. The 3000 portion of that means that you can convert 3000 watts from 48 to 12 and vice versa, but you probably wouldn't do it vice versa because you'd limit to what the warranty on the stock alternators are. But I mean, yeah, essentially it gives you roughly 250 amps of 12 volt available. And ideally you don't need to use that amount. Other converters on the market are so underpowered that this is sort of like the next level.
It's a beast.
Yeah, it's definitely a beast.
If you look and see my MPPT, this is the charge, the controller for the solar panels. It's a bit small.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, when you step up in voltage, like we spoke about, you step down in amperage. And so you can produce more power with this in a 48 volt system than you can on a 12 volt system. And that's because 20 amps at 48 volts is 4 times the amount of energy that 20 amps at 12 volts is.
Yeah.
And so you can do a smaller MPPT as long as you don't exceed the voltage input. So I haven't seen the voltage on the new Zamp 48 volt panels, but I'm guessing it's under 100, and we'll obviously size that appropriately when the time comes, but it's probably under 100, and if we need to step up we can, but this is sort of like what we're planning on using at the moment.
Yeah, Zamp is a company I just visited a couple of episodes ago. They're providing me with 4 100 watt 48 volt panels, which will fit on the van. They're not finished yet. I really wanted this whole area decked out with all the finished components, but they're going to let us know exactly what Sam needs to know in order to compensate the correct MPPT. Obviously, the communication system that'll be inside the van, this will allow me to control and understand the flow of power within the power system.
Yep, so that's the new Touch GX 70, which is the same as the Touch GX 50, but it's a 7-inch instead of a 5-inch. Really nice. They keep on updating the firmware on it, which is going to give increased functionality. I mentioned in the future you're going to be able to see sort of Wakespeed integration with that. They're also doing they've constantly updated the graphics from when it first came out, and I continue to I believe that they're going to keep doing that. There's also increased functionality, so now you can turn on and off the inverter from there. You can also limit the current, which was a big sort of step in the right direction. But that's really just displaying information from the servo, and so the servo is going to take all of that information that we talked about earlier. The servo also has the ability to monitor tanks and temperature on that, and then we can also control relays based on that information as well. So the new integration from Victron with Ruby, which is the wireless temp sensors that you can see over there. So they're going to connect up to the servo via Bluetooth, so 0 cables have to be ran, and then you'll be able to control relays based off of that. They also have an interior and an exterior version. The exterior one is IP68 rated, and the less penetrations in a vehicle, the better. They've got a 2-year battery life as well.
Now this system is pretty advanced, you'd say?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of advanced components. My objective was sort of to DIY a lot of this stuff on my own, but as Sam pointed out when we were laying the system out, this isn't something that I'm going to be able to take back to Detroit and like reliably 100% hook up as just a Joe Schmo. And so he's giving me these components so that I can size them and build out my interior, and then I'm going to come back once the interior is all... Oh. That is the sweetest dog. But I will come back, and then he will plug point A into point B and get it all set up.
The reason that we got put in touch was through Victron, so you know, they're kindly donating the sort of components other than the batteries in the system for your journey, and we're sort of really excited to be a part of that. This is definitely an advanced system, super niche at the moment in the market as well. Not a lot of people sort of have access to or the knowledge to sort of put these kind of systems together. We're in a really lucky position with our sort of involvement with Victron and other leaders in the industry, such as Wakespeed and Nations, to sort of be able to do this. So we're really excited to keep pushing the industry in the right direction and for you to be a part of that as well.
Awesome. What? He looks at you like, come on, give me love. Anyways, that's the system in a very, very detailed nutshell. It's going to be a system that you guys are going to learn from, right?
We're always learning.
Yeah, you're always learning.
I think that's a really important aspect as well. If you meet someone in the industry that knows it all, you're in trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's been a really exciting part of sort of our journey. You know, it's incredibly humbling to sort of speak to the people that we do who know a huge amount about what they're doing and play a role in their success. But we're super stoked from the support from being part of the Victron team. Really stoked on the support that we've had from Wakespeed and Nations, as well as a ton of other industry leaders in terms of product integration.
As I've traveled around on this tour, I've met a lot of people from different industries, and everybody sort of knew each other, and everybody was sort of sharing ideas and how to integrate and work together. As a matter of fact, in probably the next maybe a couple of episodes down the road, you'll see a collaboration with Rixson, where they produce hot water and hot flooring systems for keeping your van toasty in the cold. And can I talk about the floor?
Yeah, for sure.
Sam here produces the actual CNC cut flooring systems, which will actually go into the van. You'll see a future episode on that, where they're cutting. Explain it a little.
We bought this CNC and run an operation down in Portland at the moment. When we move into the new facility, that'll all be on site.
Yep.
But yeah, we produce these the floors for Rixson, so those will be released probably in April. But essentially, we use a closed cell foam composite board that's reinforced with fiberglass, and so it's 60% the weight of Baltic birch plywood. It's just as dense as Baltic birch, so normally you've had this sort of trade-off between using cheaper plywood that has more voids and less ply lines, and which is lighter over the stability over time. So it's 60% the weight of Baltic, but with the same energy, the same density as Baltic. It's zero rot. It's 3 times more insulating than plywood. Its sound deadening properties. It was designed for the marine and industrial mobile market, and we're lucky to be a distributor of that particular board that we're using. We use 3/4 inch, and that height doesn't change regardless of whether you go with heated floors or not. So we CNC the floors for the pecs with heat reflectors, and then you can have if you have heated floors, we put an overlayment on top so that you have a nice flat finish floor.
To build your interior from.
To have your finished floor go over and then build all your cabinets over.
Cool. Anyways, like, subscribe, share, comment. This is a bit technical. I'm going to share this video with the message of forums and stuff. I think this will be a good technical video. Maybe not my typical subscribers will be able to follow all of this, but like, subscribe, share, comment. Just Roaming's information is in the description, so check them out. Victron obviously is in the description. Check them out. And yeah, we have power.